The James Chambers Show contains adult language.
Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore warns Christians to prepare to be persecuted.
When federal courts start changing our Constitution by defining words that are not even there, like marriage, they're going to do the same thing with family.
Not too long ago, everybody acknowledged God. And what's happened? Today, they have two men getting married in chapel.
And the crowd went wild down in Fairhope last night when Judge Roy Moore actually pulled a gun out of his pocket and started waving it around.
I believe in the Second Amendment.
Welcome to the James Chambers Show. I'm your host for this podcast, James Chambers. Before we dig in, I want to preface this piece with a personal story. Here's how it started. In the wake of report after report of sexual misconduct among lawmakers and actors and Hollywood stars and the current president, lest we forget, and very recently Roy Moore of Alabama, it seemed necessary to explore some of these allegations. Having read reporting from the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC, ABC, CBS, their local affiliates, Fox, and others, it became clear to me that the Roy Moore situation is the more significant story. In no way do I mean that allegations of sexual misconduct in any form are not intrinsically significant. However, the Roy Moore allegations are deeply troubling for one specific reason. He's being accused of inappropriate sexual contact with a minor. Now, beyond that, Moore is a religious extremist who is willing to place his personal and religious beliefs above the freedoms of others, and he is running for the Senate in Alabama. The seat was vacated by now Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. I began information gathering on Judge Moore for a story. A day later, a friend of mine ran across my notes and had some rather stark and honest comments. Our conversation lasted nearly 2 hours and ranged in topics, so I won't recount all of that here, but he was very concerned that what I had written was a final draft and maybe even on this YouTube channel. He was concerned that it was a hit piece, and I was being unfair to Judge Moore. Not only that, but feeding into a hard partisan slander culture, which in his view dominates the news media as a whole. In the rough form that my notes were in, I could see that being a mostly reasonable assessment. So immediately I corrected the misunderstanding, noting that my style of preparation for scripting is loose and with little form until if I get on a rant or just stumble upon a good turn of phrase. And it usually takes multiple revisions and edits to get these pieces even close to where I want them to be. And just as an aside, I stand by my beliefs and I stand by what I publish here on the show. But that being said, I also reserve the right to change my mind in the face of evidence or persuasive argument. In this case, because my story wasn't complete, and I value this friendship, I chose to smooth the waters while still disagreeing on several points throughout the conversation. So I say all this to get at a larger idea. Our political dialogue has become so toxic, so charged with negativity, that recounting facts can be seen as an attack. Speaking objective truth can be willfully ignored and pointed to as being elitist or disrespectful of others' beliefs, and none of that is healthy. Fake news becomes anything you personally disagree with or doesn't fit your worldview. And even in the case of my friend, his gut reaction was cynicism and concern. We're all giving each other a permanent side eye. And I'm absolutely not the first person to make these observations, but I see a direct connection from the toxic political atmosphere in Alabama to the potential election of Roy Moore. In the case of Moore and all the other alleged sexual harassers, we need to be both sympathetic to the accuser and reasonable to the accused. Accusations are not proof, nor are they convictions. It would be completely wrong to toss each of the accused under the bus solely on hearsay. Weaponizing hearsay is exceedingly dangerous. On the other hand, ignoring patterns of behavior, multiple accounts of similar deviant actions need to be taken seriously too. So, even though Roy Moore is tanking in the Alabama polls as of this recording, I'm going to use him as a foil for this larger idea, and I believe you'll see why once all those dots are connected. So now, a primer on Judge Roy Moore in his own words for those who are not familiar with his career.
Audio Jungle.
Welcome to the new world. It just changed for you Christians. It's a time now when you're going to be persecuted according to the United States Supreme Court.
And the crowd went wild down in Fairhope last night when Judge Roy Moore actually pulled a gun out of his pocket and started waving it around.
Send them all a message.
Now we got blacks and whites fighting, reds and yellows fighting, Democrats and Republicans fighting, men and women fighting. What's going to unite us? What's going to bring us back together?
It's not just redefining marriage, it's giving no definition to marriage.
Moore's position is that state courts have just as much authority to interpret the U.S. Constitution as the federal courts do.
This power over marriage, which came from God under our organic law, is not to be redefined by the United States Supreme Court or any federal court.
Drain the swamp.
You say man is created or woman's created for man, we're going to change it. You say life begins in the womb, we're going to change it. You can murder, we're going to change that and call it something else.
Who is Judge Roy Moore? Roy Moore has a long and tumultuous record in Alabama. He has been long stirring controversy going back decades, so we'll just start in the 2000s. While sitting as the Chief Justice in the Alabama Supreme Court in 2002, Moore made his feelings about LGBTQ parents and potential adoptive parents quite clear. Quote, "I write specifically to state that the homosexual conduct of a parent creates a strong presumption of unfitness that alone is sufficient justification for denying that parent custody of his or her own children or prohibiting the adoption of the children of others." Moore labeled, quote, homosexual conduct by parents being, quote, detrimental to the children, writing that it is and has been considered abhorrent, immoral, detestable, a crime against nature, and a violation of the laws of nature and of nature's God upon which this nation and our laws are predicated. There is, of course, no objective evidence for these claims. Moore rests on his religious orientation to inform his judicial rulings. During his tenure as the Chief Justice, Moore was removed twice by a judicial ethics panel. The first time Moore was fired was in 2003 for failing to remove a large 2.5-ton granite statue of the Ten Commandments displayed inside the state Supreme Court building. No surprise, he ran for office again and won. Ethics be damned, said the majority of Alabamans. Moore's beliefs fit neatly into the evangelical Christian worldview, as well as the conservative worldview, and Moore has enjoyed the beliefs of the conservative and evangelical vote for decades. Choosing to apply one's personal interpretation of religious values over the secular law of the land is not following in the spirit of liberty and justice for all. Actually, it's not following the Constitution either. Moore touts the First Amendment heavily as the arbiter of his faith, but readily forgets Article 6 of the Constitution, which clearly holds that the federal law is, quote, the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. His second ethics review and subsequent removal from office came in 2012. This time it was for directly violating the U.S. Supreme Court ruling the same-sex couples can marry. He argued that no federal court has the right to define marriage, and that the states have the right to set their own standards for what marriage means. And what is that about? What's that about Article 6 again? Maybe there is a scholarly argument to be made in a legal journal somewhere about states' rights and the definition of terms such as religion or marriage. But the effect of disregarding the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage was to disenfranchise an entire section of the population for no good reason. A religious reason is simply not good enough. And frankly, this made Alabama look really, really bad on the national stage. But still, evangelicals love Roy. Yeah, but he was fired. In 2014, Moore attempted to gin up support for a constitutional convention to define marriage as being, quote, between one man and one woman. Moore claimed, the moral foundation of our country is under attack and that the government has become oppressive and judges are warping the law. Well, clearly that convention didn't happen. Moore has claimed that communities in Indiana and Illinois are currently under Sharia law, but when pressed, he concedes to the interviewer that he has no proof. Moore still promotes the bullshit lie that President Obama was not born in the U.S. Moore believes that the First Amendment of the Constitution is to, quote, foster religion and foster Christianity, and to deny Christianity or Christian principles is to deny what the First Amendment was established for. You see, the First Amendment was established on Christian principles because it was Jesus that said this, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God's." He, Jesus, recognized this jurisdiction the government does not have, and that was the freedom of conscience. I'm pretty sure Moore is taking the wrong meaning from Luke here. Maybe he should reference Romans 3 or 13:1 as well. Maybe. And maybe that wouldn't help, since Moore believes that the separation of church and state is a very religious process, in his own words. If all of that isn't disqualifying enough for a senatorial contender, well, try these. He brought a gun to an election rally. He referred to Asians and Native Americans as reds and yellows. He doesn't know who the Dreamers are, and that's all 800,000 of them. He believes that 9/11 and domestic terrorism are God's punishment of America for our becoming more secular. He rode a horse to a polling place. He denies evolution. He believes homosexual conduct should be illegal. And did you know that homosexuality is the same as bestiality? Well, Roy thinks so. Am I making a sharp point about this particular guy? Yeah. But more than his beliefs, I'm concerned about the rationality of those people who support ideas like his. This goes back to the toxic nature of our political discourse. People find disregarding federal law and flaunting irrational and cruel homophobic beliefs, or codifying Christianity as the primary tentpole of our national legal system, as somehow moral and just and even righteous. These Americans have spent so much time swimming in the stew of so-called white victimization that anyone who can reflect their beliefs back at them, no matter how irrational or unseemly, is a good choice. Jonathan Gray, a Republican political strategist in Alabama, had this to say about the election, quote, "The people of Alabama are tired of being run over by liberal policies and the federal government, to the point where if they were shoved into a corner and that it was a choice between Satan or a Democrat, they would take Satan." Here's where the ethical rubber meets the road, friends, and I promise I will not delve too deep into the more salacious allegations leveled against Roy Moore. As I've laid out, he holds some rather hardline ideas about religion and marriage and gender and doctrine, but he has more than one skeleton in the closet, and they are coming for him. So I'll just go through a list of the accusers and what the complaints are, and these accusations are in chronological order by date of event, not when the accusations were levied. Also, let's be clear that not all of these incidents are illegal. Some are just odd or inappropriate, but all lead to a disquieting pattern of behavior. 1977, Beverly Young Nelson, 16, attempted rape. 1979, Lee Korfman, 14, forcibly undressed and touched inappropriately. And this is the most legally troubling accusation for Mr. Moore. Korfman was a minor at the time. 1979, Wendy Miller, 16, asked out by Moore, but her mother refused to allow it. Fun fact, Moore had known her since she was 14 and working as a Santa's helper at the Gadsden Mall. 1979, Gloria Thacker Deason, 18, multiple dates, accused of supplying alcohol to a minor while she was still 17. 1981, Deborah Wesson Gibson, 17, several dates. Now, November 9th of 2017, the Washington Post article is released making the allegations, including Korfman, Miller, Deason, and Gibson. November 11th, Teresa Jones, who was a deputy DA in the 1990s, tweets her experience while working at the DA's office under Roy Moore. Quote, "As a deputy DA in Gadsden, when Roy Moore was there, it was common knowledge about Roy's propensity for teenage girls. I'm appalled that these women are being skewered for the truth," she wrote. Jones said in an interview that, quote, "It was common knowledge that Roy dated high school girls. Everyone we knew thought it was weird, and we wondered why someone his age would hang out at high school football games and the mall." Moore was in his 30s at the time. Now, November 13th, 2017. Nelson comes forward with the allegations of attempted rape. She notes that Moore was a powerful man and that no one would believe her if she told anyone. There are multiple unconfirmed stories about Moore rolling around the internet, and I can't vouch for their authenticity, but there is a consistent pattern of allegedly predatory behavior that is consistent with other cases of sexually predatory men. Trolling malls and teenage hangouts, flirting too much, making people uncomfortable by leering and tone of voice, etc. In the 1990s, several former waitresses claimed that Moore made them feel uncomfortable by staring at them and flirting, and when they didn't flirt and smile back, he would become rude and demanding. And again, alone, this may not be disturbing behavior, but put in the context of his supposed flagrant sexual attraction and his purported aggression towards really young women, it becomes gross and just highly unnerving. Now that we all need a quick shower, let me reiterate that we don't know if any of these allegations are true, and we may never know. As of a week ago, to the date of this episode, Roy Moore was leading in the polls. He led with double digits, and his victory over the Democratic challenger was nearly assured. And that has all changed. The national Republican leadership has all but abandoned him. The GOP funding mechanisms have all dried up. Fox News has turned on him. Even Sean Hannity, a reliable Moore supporter, has backed off. And of course, Hannity only dropped his support for Moore after nearly a dozen national sponsors pulled their ads. Oh, and by the way, if you want to laugh, just check out the jackwagons on YouTube who've taken up arms against their Keurig coffee makers after Keurig pulled their sponsorship from Hannity's show. It's poetic. Destroy your crappy coffee makers in support of a crappy Fox News poop cannon who is supporting a crappy candidate who is an alleged sexual molester. So herein lays the problem. Moore was ahead in the polls for all the wrong reasons, and it took a national scandal which included child abuse to get people to take a second look. Even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell took 3 days to even make a statement. And sadly, there are still those who would rather vote for anyone, including an alleged child molester or Satan, rather than a Democrat. Moore's candidacy is a sign of a larger, deeper problem. Until we can get our national dialogue back on track, we are in for a really bumpy ride. Remember the white victim stew I referenced earlier? Well, here's what it's made from. It's 1 part racism, 1 part white privilege, 1 part fear, or substitute hate if you're just angry and not really afraid, 2 parts arrogance, 1 sprig of thyme, assorted misused Bible verses to taste, 4 large carrots, salt, and now after 1 hour, add the blood of a Democrat for that zippy tang, or Antifa if you like it bitter. Simmer in a large pot for 6 hours on the ashes of democracy while Fox News laments the loss of our nation to socialists. Serve hot and vote. I humbly leave this part of the show with an excerpt of thoughtful, poetic verse, a cry of hope and sadness, pain and longing for a better tomorrow, born from the horror of an ashen, decaying present, and the imagining of a golden, lofty past. America the Beautiful, by Judge Roy Moore. America the Beautiful, or so you used to be. Land of the Pilgrim's pride. I'm glad they're not here to see babies piled in dumpsters, abortion on demand. Oh, sweet land of liberty, your house is on the sand. Your children wander aimlessly, poisoned by cocaine, choosing to indulge their lusts while God has said abstain. From sea to shining sea, this nation has turned away from the teaching of God's law and the need to always pray. We voted in governments that are rotting to the core, appointing godless judges who throw reason out the door, too soft to put a killer in a well-deserved tomb, but brave enough to kill that child before he leaves the womb. America the Beautiful, you will see a sad but holy God withdraw his hand from thee. Thank you for listening to the Roy Moore Roundup on the James Chambers Show. If you have any comments, please leave them in the section below. You're always welcome to contact The JC Show at RealJCShow2017@gmail.com or tweet us at RealJCShow. Hit us with the hashtag RoyMoore, hashtag Alabama, and click subscribe to be notified of new content, and be sure to share and like the episodes. If you or a loved one has been the victim of sexual abuse or violence, contact the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, or NSVRC, toll-free at 877-739-3895 to get connected with local resources. Again, that's the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, toll-free 1-877-739-3895 to get connected with local resources. Catch up with us next time on The James Chambers Show, and thank you for listening.